Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm Richard Kravitz, UCCS Director, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the UCCS Summer Academic Forum and Showcase. This is a really great time for all of us. We get to see the culmination of the students' work and have the opportunity to thank and recognize the students for everything that they've done and all the effort that they've put into learning and participating in various experiences throughout the Capitol, although this summer, of course, in a virtual sense. And it's also a chance for us to thank internship hosts for providing students with these invaluable experiences that really make a difference in their academic lives and their careers. And finally, of course, to the center staff for making all of this happen during, again, during these extraordinary times. So without saying much more, I think we're going to get into it and hear a bunch of what I understand to be, and judging from the first session, a set of fantastic presentations. So let's go ahead.
Fantastic, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kravitz. So in regards to today's format, so students will go ahead and do their presentation. So I'll call on each student. They will share their screen, they will talk about and do their presentation on their poster. And then after they're done, we will go ahead and take a question from their internship host site. If their internship host site doesn't have a question, then it'll go to our academic team. And then the next student will present and then they'll get their question. Time permitting, there will be hopefully time at the end to go ahead and just do kind of an open Q&A. And so audience, as you're watching our students, and if there is a question that you have about someone's poster, go ahead and jot it down, and hopefully we have time at the end to go ahead and open up to everybody. All right, and so with that, our first student is Paula Avalos. So Paula, if you can go ahead and start sharing your screen, that'd be great, thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Okay, my name is Paula Avalos, and this is 1 in 10 Buffering Disparities in Education. Did you know that only 1 in 10 students from under-resourced communities in the U.S. will graduate college, while 1 in 2 students in high-resource communities will graduate college? These large disparities in education that feed into the achievement gap and intergenerational poverty have been evident for a long time in history. In 2019, California alone reported that 781 schools lacked resources for their students. Previous research has shown that social support increases motivation and that programs which integrate this peer support model buffer disparities in education. My hypothesis is that support programs will increase graduation rates. Shown in Figure 2, it is evident that students enrolled in AVID have higher enrollment at four-year college campuses in California. Figure 3 shows us how social and emotional skills increase when students are enrolled in these programs across all grade levels. And Figure 4 shows that breakthrough students were 7 times more likely to graduate from college than students in similar economic backgrounds. I believe that peer support programs should be more easily accessible at every school. I would also like to push for a high-quality teacher training to be provided in order to integrate these peer support models within the classroom to help students who are under-resourced. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Paula. And so Paula interned at the UC Davis School of Education, Center for Applied Policy and Education. And so if there are any questions from the office, if you can just go ahead and raise your hand, and Sandra Wilson, our office, will go ahead and call on you.
Hi, Christina. I see you have a question. If you can introduce yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Murdoch. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Applied Policy and Education. And Paula was my intern this quarter. It was wonderful to have her work with us and become familiar with the work that we do. So Paula, I have a question about your Figure 4. Breakthrough students, can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, so the Breakthrough program provides it's an after-school program, and so it kind of provides more of like a social support outside of the classroom. And so these students, for example, 7th through 9th grade, these students would go on like camps, which would push them academically, or in high school, they would, Breakthrough would provide like SAT support. And so here in this figure, we see that from 2018, the average percentage that the average percentage of students they were higher when breakthroughs, if they were involved in breakthrough. So we see that lower income students that didn't have that breakthrough support or that program were lower than students that were enrolled in the breakthrough program. So it shows how breakthrough can really like impact how this social support outside of the classroom can impact students' lives. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Paula. That's really helpful.
Great, thank you so much, Paula. And so our next student is Armando Pina. Great, thank you so much, Armando.
Good morning, my name is Armando Pina and I am a student at the University of California, Davis. Today I will be presenting to you DACA Undocumented Students, an analysis of educational inequity at the University of California. DACA undocumented students face many challenges on top of what regular students face throughout their time in college. This means an extra application every 2 years and the fear of not fitting into the UC community due to lack of knowledge and resources and opportunity. The purpose of my research was to find the level of support that each UC campus offers and makes available to the DACA undocumented students to establish a safe environment for them, as well as by doing so, help eliminate the educational inequity many DACA undocumented students feel on campus. To answer the question, I performed an evaluation of all 10 campuses system-wide, thus ranking the campuses from least equitable to most based on the resources available at each respective campus to these students. As you can see on figure 4, of UC campus rankings, UCLA is ranked #1 on both impact and resources, making it the most equitable UC in the system. Using the evaluation of resources available, I then found that the respective groups and organizations in particular available to these students include legal help, educational, financial, co-curricular, social and cultural, and mental health. Although all other campuses offer similar centers available to these students, many of them do not attend due to fear of judgment due to their social and legal status, thus promoting the idea of campus inequity throughout most of the UC campuses. This leading to my proposal in which I recommend that the focus is not just the educational being of a student, but the well-being of an individual as part of a person in a top-ranked university in the state of California. This can be done simply by creating a safe place for students in the already established DACA undocumented student centers, and most importantly, promoting inclusivity through school events that highlight talents, people, and culture to create a place where students want to be. I believe that by doing so, the UC system will not only contribute to create an environment for all students, but help eliminate the educational inequity currently present system-wide. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Armando. And so this summer, Armando interned with the UC Office of the President, State Governmental Relations. And so I know we have several people there from the office. And so if folks have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. Sandra will go ahead and unmute you. You can go ahead and ask your question. And if not, someone from our academic team?
Hey Armando, this is Ross, your professor for Pole 185. Nice presentation, thank you so much. I was wondering, so in figure 2 there, Los Angeles stands out as like a kind of, way off the scale of the number of resources. Why do you think UCLA has so many more resources available to these students when compared to other campuses, which all seem to have about a score of 4 or 5 on your scale?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I kind of connected it back to figure 4, where it's campus ranking. UCLA is ranked one of the #1s in impact for students. So from the data, you can see that the schools that have the most students are also the schools that are ranking higher in number of resources. So I think that might be something that has to do that there's some kind of correlation where the number of students correlates with the number of resources that the campus offers.
Perfect, thanks Armando.
No problem, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Armando. And so our next student is Carl Jang.
Good morning. My name is Carl Zhang. I'm a student at UC Davis, and my research poster is does the census save colleges tuition? So, take a look at Figure 1 here. It took only 20 years for the UC tuition to quadruple. College students today are paying much more than what their parents did, and despite attending public institutions, UC graduates are still expected to owe about $20,000 for bachelor's degrees, sometimes forcing them to work for low-skilled jobs just to pay back their loans. These graduates are now replacing the aging workforce that requires higher education, thus hurting the entire American economy. Upon researching the census for my internship, I learned that its findings are used to allocate federal Pell Grant, a major source of financial aid. If that is the case, wouldn't higher response rates benefit undergraduates by positively affecting the amount of Pell Grant? And this became my working hypothesis. I compiled the Pell Grant allocation per domestic undergraduate student from 1990 to 2017, and for the data after 2001, compared them to census self-response rates of 2000 and 2010. These response rates are sourced from census tracts matching the boundaries of UC campuses. When they were unavailable, I instead used the response rates of the UC hosting cities. As you can see in Figure 2, Pell Grant is constantly increasing, and the figure below indicates that UCs generally respond to the census comparable to the state average. Quite contrary to my hypothesis, however, as seen in Figure 4a, there is actually no correlation between response rates and Pell Grant per capita. In fact, tuition hikes are very closely related to the Pell Grant. Thus, I conclude that at this moment, no new policies can be introduced. However, future research should focus on the impact of census for college students on all possible expenses and subsidies, ranging from food and housing to every type of financial aid, both state and federal. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Carl. And so this summer, Carl interned with the UC Student Association. And so if there's anyone from UCSA who wanted to go ahead and ask a question, please go ahead and raise your hand, and Sandra will go ahead and call on you and unmute you.
Okay, so I see you have a question with the UC Student Association. If you can please introduce yourself and state your question.
Sure. Hey, everybody. This is Parshan with UC Student Association. Carl, great presentation. I had a question for you. As you were looking at the census sort of data, did you see any effects? Were you able to do sort of regional breakdowns between northern and southern and different sort of geographical breakdowns? Maybe there are differences there.
That's a great question, and unfortunately, I did not do any research on that aspect. However, I did some other research on the relationships between Pell Grant and census response rates by both city and county level, and neither of those had any significant correlation.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Carl. And so our next student is Chloe Zaire.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Chloe Zaire, and my pronouns are she, hers. Now let's get one thing straight. At the University of California, 5% of students experience homelessness. And in comparison to non-LGBT students, LGBT students are 2 times more likely to report experiencing homelessness while at the UC. According to the 2016 GFI report, students who report experiencing homelessness are also more likely to show lower indications of academic success, such as GPA and retention rates. So, what does housing status and LGBT identity have to do with academic experience at the UC? In order to address this question, I used survey data from the UCCS 2016 survey that asked students to rate their overall academic experience from very dissatisfied to very satisfied. I hypothesized that housing status and LGBT status would be significant indicators of student academic satisfaction level. And in my analysis through association and independence tests, I found this to be true. LGBT status and housing status were significant indicators in academic satisfaction level. In addition, I found that the difference of academic satisfaction level between homeless LGBT and non-LGBT was statistically significant. In addition, overall, LGBT students seemed to fare the worst, as you can see in figure 3, when it came to academic satisfaction level, with homeless LGBT students reporting 38% dissatisfied. In conclusion, I would like to state that this topic is underexplored and deserves attention from the UC and the state of California, because as my research shows, there's a salient association between LGBT identity and homeless status and academic experience while at the UC. I would suggest that, that California and the UC invest in a longitudinal data system that tracks academic and social data from K through 12 and higher education, so that we can better understand and help homeless students, and especially those who are at a higher risk for it, such as LGBT students. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you so much, Chloe. And so this summer, Chloe interned with the UC Student Association. And so if there's a question from UCSA, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand, and Sandra will go ahead and call and unmute you.
Hey, Chloe. This is Ashraf Bishay. I'm the Policy Director of the UC Student Association. Great presentation. I wanted to ask real quick, how do you think the factor of homelessness and LGBTQ identity can interplay and can somewhat affect each other in a student's experience at the UC?
That is a great question. And I think that that question goes back to even before people reach higher ed, but just within the UC, I believe that LGBT students are at, in general, higher risk for experiencing homelessness. While those factors are not entirely determined, there's plenty with economic factors, such as just having lower socioeconomic status and other factors just like that. But I think that LGBT students are going to be more likely, especially if they have also experienced housing insecurity, which it can take on many different forms, but they will be more likely to suffer socially and academically, especially the non-LGBT students.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chloe.
Great. Thank you so much, Chloe. And so our next student is Brandon Young.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Young from the University of California, Riverside, and today I'll be presenting a projection on the effects of COVID-19 on graduation rates system-wide among California's higher education institutions. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, California's higher education institutions together have reported losses of over $2 billion. And so in consideration of data from the last financial crisis it faced, the 2009 Great Recession, this research's guiding question asks, what can the UC and its students expect to see over the next few years? It is hypothesized that tuition hikes and the drastic change in learning environment will lead to lower graduation rates. UC enrollment data and historical tuition data is set as the backdrop on which to analyze historical graduation and success rates. While no correlation was found between the financial crisis and graduation rates, it should be noted that there remain several indicators that may better capture the impact of the crisis on students' graduation rate, such as borrowing rate and satisfaction rate. These will be further explored in my research paper. In its analysis, however, it was observed that while both non-resident enrollment and tuition increased dramatically in the years following 2009, and it can be projected to do the same following 2020, graduation and success rates at all three institutions continued to increase through the decade. A lull in California resident enrollment was observed at the UC between 2009 and 2014, but with the move to remote instruction, this may be no factor as well in the current state of the pandemic, as students no longer have to worry about additional campus housing concerns. Remote instruction as well has been observed to have only increased in success rates and enrollment, with the California community colleges reporting steady increases since 2005 and through the recession years, with the gap in success between distance and traditional instruction closing from 17% in 2005 to 11% in 2011 to just 4% in 2017. Should the UC be diligent in following and exercising ACHA policies on safe reopening, the campuses should be able to more quickly begin recuperating lost revenue in order to prevent additional tuition increases. And by adopting a strong advising system that encourages student success in a remote environment through mapping and instructional support, graduation rates may hopefully remain unaffected by the pandemic. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Brandon. And so this summer, Brandon interned with the UC Student Association. And so, and I already see that there's a question. So you can go ahead and see here. Yep, there we go.
Thank you, Cindy. Hey, Brandon, this is Parshan with UCSA. So over here, I noticed it was very interesting. You pointed out to the remote education aspect. Now we know that since the last sort of financial crisis, the remote education has been the most unique new kind of trend with the rise of it. Do you happen to have, and I'm noticing that completion rate graph on the bottom, would you happen to have those completion rates by racial breakdowns? It would be very interesting to know how different racial ethnic groups are faring with respect to completion rate of online courses.
That's a great question. So I don't have the graph obviously on the poster, but there was an observed, there was data on distance education completion rates based on ethnicity. And so the interesting thing that I observed was there was a steady increase in success rates from 2005 to 2017 of roughly 10 to 15% across all ethnicities. However, it should be noticed that Black students appear to, while Black students showed the same increase in success rates, their success rates are still overall roughly 15 to 20% below other ethnicities, such as white students or Asian Pacific Islander students who top the charts between 60 and 70% completion rates. We see Black students' success rates hovering between 50 and 60% instead. And so there is still definitely an ethnic disparity despite us seeing increases in success rates across all ethnic groups.
Very interesting. Thank you, Brandon.
All right, thank you so much, Brandon. And so our next student is Christian Alvarado.
Hello, everyone. I'm from, so my name is Christian Alvarado. I'm from University of California, Riverside. So the question I have is this. So in 2013, California adopted a new school funding from the focus more on equity and transparency and academic, the focus more on equity to improve California's high school graduations and academic performance. This new school funding formula is called a local control funding formula, which replaced the complex school finance system that California used to have. This is more of an equity-based funding that started with the school with school LCAP. So for my hypothesis was this: the LCFFs improve graduation rates in California public schools and also improve student academic performance. And by that, I did for my research design, I conducted a small study of 3 school districts, which are Modesto, Sirius, and Turlock school districts. I picked these districts because they have over 50% of the student population that are high needs, and all 3 on California Central Valley. For this, I compared the graduation rates, math and ELA proficiencies, also college readiness after the LCFF was implemented. My findings were the series has a slight decrease in graduation rates. Other than that, districts have a steady ELA and college readiness scores. math scores are still low in the districts. And for my conclusion, graduation rates have seen an increase. Only in case of series that has seen a slight decrease. LCFF has increased scores, and both AOLA and college readiness math scores are still low, which I would suggest to actually put more funding on to increase the math scores and also student support services as well. Overall, they still need some fixes, but LCFF has seen some positive results.
All right, thank you so much, Christian. So Christian, intern with the California Department of Education, Education Equities Office. And I see that Diana has a question. And so, and we've got you unmuted now, Diana. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Great presentation, Christian. My name is Diana Gutierrez, and I'm from the Education Equity UCP office in the California Department of Education. Christian, thank you so much for your research. I did have a question about one of your conclusions was that your recommendation is that we provide additional funding for student support services. So I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit more about what types of services would you recommend for students in these particular districts to improve their academic levels?
So for the type of services, I recommend like to provide more counseling, more after school programs, counselors, psychologists. I mean, more of the social services because these students they come from the Central Valley, over the student population are 50% over our high needs. Most likely, they do need more social care. They need people. The students need some that actually care, that can improve their lives. That actually take some upon themselves to actually help them, to give them a helping hand.
Great. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Christian. And so our next student is Brett Guinan.
Yes. Right.
Hi, my name is Brett Guinan, and in light of the circumstances around the death of George Floyd this last May, I chose to focus my research this quarter on the issue of racial bias in the US. This is a topic that has been discussed at every level of government these past months, and as we move our communities forward, it is valuable to consider what progress, if any, has been made in our past. In the late 60s, racism shifted from something blatantly obvious to something a little more difficult to measure as it became increasingly tied to specific policy issues. Many researchers have named welfare as one of these racially coded topics, and yet some still argue that positions on government spending are purely ideological and that opposition to welfare has nothing to do with race. Now, as recent events have suggested the continued presence of racial bias in the criminal justice system, I suspected that there would be indicators of these biases in welfare opinions too. In order to control for individual ideology, my project started by considering how each respondent felt about their own right to government aid. I used ANES data from 1972 to 2016 and hypothesized that there would be a consistent or growing trend of people who support aid for themselves but do not support it for Blacks in recent years. The data showed that less than 1% of respondents actually varied their support based on who the recipient of the aid would be, but we can still look at the trends for that more extreme percent, which are represented in figure 3. While this data shows that white support for only themselves has declined since the 70s, in the last election cycle, there has been the largest increase in this proportion in 30 years, which could be a small indicator of growing racism since 2012. And further research should consider data after the 2020 election to see if this trend continues to grow. It should also see if this same recent spike is present in other racially coded issues. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Brett. And so this summer, Brett interned with the California Department of Education Legislative Affairs Office. And so if there is a question from the office, if you can go ahead and just raise your hand and Sandra could go ahead and call on you and unmute you.
Hi, Ellie, if you can introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, this is Ellie Garner. I'm the director of the Government Affairs Division, where Brett was our fantastic intern this summer. And I want to thank you for highlighting this, as this is an issue that I think all of the government entities are dealing with and trying to understand better. So you had some further research recommendations. What specifically should be asked in the next round of conversations about this issue?
So as I guess it didn't specifically state, but the policy areas that have really been highlighted as being always associated and coded racial issues, welfare, housing, and criminal justice. We're looking for inconsistencies or disparities in those opinions as well. It's not, no one is outright stating that they think that
Certainly.
there are different values for people based on their race, but if you can follow these same kind of trends and inconsistencies where you think something should be allowed for you, but not for the other.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Brett. And so our next student is Erica Valle.
Hi everyone, my name is Erica Valle and I'm from the University of California, Davis. Systematic racism exists in America and it exists in the California community college system. As you could see in figure 1, California community colleges have more enrolled students than both the CSU and UC system combined, making it the largest system of higher education in the state of California and even in the United States. My objective was to analyze the relationship between systematic racism and the academic success of students of colors. I measured systematic racism by looking at faculty diversity and comparing it to student diversity. I measured student success by looking at transfer rates, degree completion rates, and course success rates. I found that while there was a very diverse student population, as you could see in figure 2, faculty is just not as diverse as you could see in figure 3, and the majority of professors are actually white. I also found that students of color, except for Latinx students, have low transfer and low degree completion rates as seen in figures 4 and 5. Additionally, course success rates are lowest among African American students and highest amongst white students. On a policy level, we could all do our part by voting yes on Proposition 16 this November. It would effectively repeal Prop 209, ending the ban on affirmative action. It would also reduce systematic racism because it allows California community colleges to legally focus on hiring more staff of color in order to meet the needs of their growing diverse student population. Additionally, it would make it easier for California community colleges to implement diversity strategies on a statewide level. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Erica. And so this summer, Erica interned with the California Community Colleges Student Success Center. And so, we already got a hand raised, and so Sandra will go ahead and unmute you, and so you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Erica. Hi, everyone. This is Amparo. I'm the Senior Policy Specialist with the Success Center. And first of all, I want to thank Erica for her time and her dedication to our work. And I think her research is very timely. I do have a question. This is all really great statistics, but I wonder if in your research you found, what does this mean for students to have faculty that is representative of who they are and their identities?
I found that research shows that a diverse faculty population actually is positive for academic success. So when students see professors that look like them, they're more prone to have, better grades, higher course completion rates, more likely to transfer, and more likely to get their degree at a community college level.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Erica. And so our next student is Salma Atik.
Hi, can you see my video?
No, we can't see your video, Sama.
Okay, that's weird. 1 second. Okay, it's
Oh,
working
yeah,
now.
we can see your video now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Selma, and today I'm going to be talking about the criminalization of homelessness in California and the effects it has on rates of homelessness in California. So the criminalization of homelessness is a term used to describe the criminal penalties, such as tickets, fine, and jail time that are given to people experiencing homelessness for carrying out life-sustaining activities in public spaces. These activities include sleeping or sitting in public areas, panhandling, or sleeping in one's car. This issue is significant in California as the state exhibits one of the highest levels of homelessness in the nation and has a deep history of criminalizing homelessness, which I hypothesize further exacerbates the issue. My research aims to study how individual laws in California affect rates of homelessness in the state by city, and whether or not the severity of these restrictions has an impact on these rates. To analyze this, I compared 4 cities in California: Modesto, Pomona, Garden Grove, and Vallejo, all with similar populations and varying levels of policies that criminalize homelessness. Through comparing data sourced by Berkeley Law and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, I found that the former 2 cities, which maintain over twice the number of laws and restrictions, also report significantly higher rates of homelessness than the latter. Some policies that I believe would help alleviate this issue are reallocating funding from law enforcement to shelters, mental health services, job coaching, and addiction treatment centers, as unemployment as well as a lack of necessary services when it comes to mental illnesses and substance abuse are some of the main causes of homelessness. I believe that an efficient implementation of these policies would serve as a viable step in helping address the homelessness crisis in California. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Sama. And so this summer, Sama interned with the California Research Bureau California Homeless Youth Project. And so if there's anyone from the office that had a question, if you can just go ahead and raise your hand. And oh, Pixie, I see you have a question. Sandra will go ahead and unmute you, and so you can go and ask your question.
Awesome. Hi, yeah, so I'm Pixie. I'm the director of the California Homeless Youth Project. Samal, thank you for being with me this summer. I know that you also did some extensive work about also the intersection of racism. Can you talk a little bit about that with the criminalization?
Yeah, so on average, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are much more likely to be criminalized when it comes to anti-homeless laws and restrictions. And so that's actually something I would like to extend my project and research for, to study more statistics on specifically how Black and Indigenous and people of color are affected by these laws and the systemic problems that are all tied in with it as well. But thank you, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And so thank you so much. So our next student is Harvey Marshall.
Hello, everybody. My name is Harlise Marshall, and I'm from the University of California, Merced. In the summer, I looked at the relationship between adult literacy and unemployment rates. So in the US, approximately 36 million adults cannot read, and California is currently the least literate state in the US at 76.9%. So that means that about 1 in 5 adults lack the basic literacy skills. So I wanted to determine what effects the literacy rates have on unemployment rates, and I hypothesized that lower literacy rates lead to lower income or higher unemployment rates. And to analyze this, I examined the most, least, and median literate states and compared their unemployment and literacy rates. And based on this, I found that unemployment rates do not seem to vary based solely on literacy rates. However, I also examined the poverty and unemployment rates by educational attainment, and I found that a negative relationship exists in both cases. So the lower your educational level is, the higher the unemployment or poverty rate compared to higher educational levels. I recommend that state and federal government increase funding to adult education programs, as well as allocate more of the federal budget to education to increase retention rate in high schools and tackle the literacy issue that is tied to other variables that play a part in increasing unemployment rates.
Great, thank you so much, Harwise. And so this summer, Harwise interned with the California State Library. And so if there's someone from the California State Library that had a question to ask, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and Sandra will go ahead and unmute you. And if not, if there's a question from the academic team.
Hey, how are we? This is Ross, your professor over there for Paul 185. So I see that California is pretty bad with their literacy rate, as you mentioned there. I was just curious, based on your findings, where you think in California have like the lowest literacy rates? Does it vary across the state? Did you notice anything like that? And do you think the relationship might be stronger between literacy rate and employment statistics if you looked at like Northern California versus Southern California, or like inland versus coastal areas? Just your thoughts on that.
So I didn't actually look at specific areas in California. I just looked at like the state as a whole, but I would hypothesize that the more rural areas versus urban areas would have lower literacy rates, as they don't have as many resources as urban areas do.
Cool, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's good next steps. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Harwees. And so we actually do have some time today for questions here at the end. And so we'll take just questions for any of our students who presented today. And so if you just go ahead and raise your hand, and Sandra Wilson, our office, will go ahead and call on you and unmute you. And when she unmutes you, you may need to go ahead and say that you are okay with her unmuting you. And so you just need to click that on your end too.